Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. Today I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Justin Hovey, who's a partner at Pillsbury. Justin, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time. So, Justin, let me start by asking you why you went to law school in the first place.
It's interesting. I've always knew I wanted to go to law school. I didn't know at the time that I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. I actually started in the tax group, but I knew I wanted to be a transactional lawyer. I think part of it is I might be a little bit on the spectrum, maybe like a dusting of Asperger's, like a powdered donut dusting, in a sense that I really like transactions. I really like beginnings and ends, and it's really the corporate practice lended itself to my personality. And while this is going to sound cliche, what I do, I think, is a calling for me. It's a passion for me. I think that it has to be if you're going to take all the sacrifices to work at a big law firm. But it really having a corporate practice of the type I do is really sort of what I was meant to be. And I'm thankful that I was able to manage my way through law school and identify that at that stage.
What made you decide to go to law school in the first place, though? What inspired you to do that?
Just at that point, I thought being a lawyer was, courts and litigation and arguing. So I really had to focus on sort of analytical debate, Socratic method. That's just our classes that I went to naturally. I wasn't scientifically driven, so it was one of those force functions that very early on in college, I knew that the output of college was going to be going into law school right away. And my mom also had a part in it because I think she was really hoping the last of four sons would follow in that path.
Did you like law school? What did you think about it?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I met some of my best friends are from there. I went down at Santa Clara. So I got to stay in California. I went to UC Davis undergrad. Really enjoyed the teachers, the curriculum, the people that I met. And then after law school, I ended up going to NYU for a tax degree. So I got to live in New York, albeit in a somewhat, cramped circumstances with my apartment, but got to go to NYU and get the sense of the tax degree, which is how I then ended up here at Pillsbury.
Well, what was it about tax that you liked? That kind of an esoteric area. What did you like about tax?
Again, like problem solving, transaction based, practical information to clients. Like when you think about tax practices, which is where I began here at Pillsbury, it's really broken up into two. One is tax planning, transactional based, super impactful, and then there's tax litigation. When I got here at Pillsbury, it started going into the tax litigation side, and I raised my hands. I said, this isn't resonating with me. And this was coinciding with, in the late 90s, early 2000s, as we all remember, some of us remember the dot-com boom, and the corporate group was just wanting anyone to help out on those deals. And luckily enough, I had bandwidth and interest, and I just moved over into the corporate group around that time. I don't know how I survived the dot-com boom, but I did.
And so how has your practice evolved since then? Tell me how it's evolved.
So I became partner at I've been at Pillsbury for 2.5 decades. And the thesis upon which I made partner was servicing large institutional clients, probably what some people would call service partner. And at that time, I had 3 clients that had an insatiable appetite for my services. And I hope what I experienced, no one else has to experience, because it was a horrible thing. I was even very overly confident at this time. I was profoundly busy. All these clients were giving me a bunch of work, and then it all came crashing down, literally in a period of a month. The first client is a very large consumer-facing company that everyone knows. And I did a lot of their M&A deals, and they called me and they're like, Corp Dev's function is over for 3 years. So that one just ended. The second client was a large historical client of the firm, institutional client. And for anyone that is listening that is in the early trajectory of their career, if you ever want to know what the cold, hard truth of business tastes like, this is what I experienced, which is the GC retired. And by the way, this was a client I worked for like the day my daughter was born, missing vacations, the whole 9 yards. And they hired a new GC. I flew up to meet the GC, and during lunch while I'm cutting the chicken, they say, yeah, we're moving all work to another firm, you're over. right? Just you could hear the scratch and the awkwardness of the conversation. I was trying to contain it. And I had deep relationships with the CEO, CFO, VP of HR, everyone in finance and legal. And the cold hard truth of business was I went to all of them and I said, this just isn't fair, right? Like, why are you not giving me a chance? And all of them said, it's not our decision. We're not going to expend any political capital to maintain our relationship with you. So that relationship ended literally overnight. And then the third one was another company, another client that had acquired a company of its size. So I equate it to sort of a snake eating like a juvenile deer. So it's just sitting on the ground with a big lump in its stomach. Like, I'm not moving for 3 years. I won't be needing you, right? So all of that work came to a crashing end. And it was a pretty depressing time for me. Like, I internalized a lot of it. I was shameful. You know, it was going to my self-worth of like, how come I don't have any work? And so, and this is all a long way of explaining where I am now, right? Which is, I do not suffer from client concentration issues. And I promised myself I'm not going to get myself into that position again. So right now I have a very broad group of clients, public, private, all industries, all geos. And while all my clients are profoundly important to me and the loss of anyone would be, you know, deeply disheartening, it wouldn't be a cathartic experience professionally. And so during that time, I had to go and learn how to build up a practice. Those were muscles I had never worked out coming up in the firm. And, you know, most work came in through Outlook, frankly. And I had to first get over myself, get over the pity party of the unfairness of it. Life's unfair, business is unfair, no one cares, get over it. I then had to get over this excuse I was giving to myself where selling my services was inauthentic or inorganic. Like, if you meet me out in the wild at a kid's soccer game, I don't talk about, even though it's a deep passion and a calling for me, I'm not going to bring up my job. It's not like an interesting thing to talk about over a soccer game. So I was using that as an excuse of it's inauthentic to try to sell my services. And I said, wait, that's just an excuse. And this is going to sound like a horrible cliche, but I'm not selling a service. I'm offering a relationship with someone like myself that has a deep passion. And that's what I told myself. And so that unlocked a lot of business development opportunities. And so then I just went on this long slog of learning how to develop business. That is this going too long? Is this so? Like I remember going to my first event, which was around this time, because it was during the Game Developers Conference, a big video game conference here in the city. And I'm like, I have to go get a client. And we were having an event down at 5:30. And I was like, I'm going to go at 5:45, you know, let the thing settle. And the elevator banks open and there's like hardly anyone there. There's a guy sitting by himself, staring at his phone. I'm like, I'm just going to go walk up to him. I walked up to him. Hi, I'm Justin Hovey, Pillsbury startup attorney. Who are you? And he says, I'm, you know, whatever, James Smith, a startup attorney at another firm. And the record scratch pain of that moment for both of us. I mean, the only thing that would have taken away the pain is if like Thanos appeared in and snapped us into infinity dust, you know? But I'm so happy that I got to taste that painful moment because it just forced me through to like learn from it, learn to get awkward with business development and expand my network and eventually get to the place where I am now, which I have a community, I have sources of business. And at this point, like I said, I have a broad base of clients that, you know, they all feed me a variety of work.
That's a really great story. I really love, and I appreciate your sharing the vulnerability of that. How did you overcome that fear? I mean, that's always, I think, very much, you know, all of us, I think, particularly lawyers, have a big fear of being rejected. And I'm sure this is not surprising to you. You know, we're used to being successful. We're used to getting into law school. We're used to being accepted. How did you get over that?
So there's been two parts of the trajectory of my career that have been the most difficult. The first is this business development part of my career, which I'll talk about. And then the second, which I'll also talk about, was where I moved into the trusted advisor role, which is mostly where I play now. In terms of the business development, I learned from that mistake, what I'll say it like this. There is nothing more intoxicating and exhilarating as a professional than getting your own business. Now, I'm not like Lars Hamilton, riding 50-foot waves or Alex Honnold free soloing El Cap, I get it. But when you have those low moments of the horribly awkward introduction to someone that neither of you want to be talking to each other, when you finally land the client, it is so fun. And I remember, and what I did was I said, I'm not going to go to these events anymore where no one knows me. I'm going to embed myself in organizations, and I'm going to speak so people see me and so they know to come up to me, right? So you use methods like that. I remember someone came up to me once after I gave a speech and said, I'm selling my company, I need help. I was like pumping my fist in the air up 280, like so happy. And it wasn't a lot of money at the time. At the time, it seemed like a lot of money. In retrospect, but just the capturing that work was so exciting. And now when I'm on like a big deal and it's firing on all cylinders and I got emails blasting from all the subject matter experts and the whole team's in my office and we're going, and I pause and I think this whole thing, this whole opportunity, put aside the revenues, just the opportunity for my team to work on this transaction, for the associates to learn, for the senior associates to learn how to manage, for the partners to learn how to get their wings under them to manage a client. All of that opportunity was generated by one conversation at an event. And none of this would have been here had I not done it. So you have to have those moments of success that allows you to tolerate the pain of getting through. And you just got to do it. And all your parts of your career are stepping stones, right? And going up is when you're learning, and going sideways is when you're mastering. And that's what I tell others. The part of my career I'm in now as a trusted advisor has been probably the most difficult in the learning phase because I suffered most deeply from imposter syndrome. And if anyone does not suffer from imposter syndrome while entering this phase, you should probably question yourself, right? Because it's, when you're thinking about all your work prior to that, you're given a deal that's already fully baked, right? Like when you're a senior associate or a junior partner, someone gives you a term sheet and says, can you execute on it? And that's more or less something you can work out those muscles and do. When you move into the trusted advisor role, which means you're at board meetings, you have line of sight into executives, you're just as much of a therapist and a life coach as a lawyer, you're brought in very early on into very fluid situations for which there's no answers. And that was a interesting phase of my career. I mean, I remember early on in that learning phase of the trusted advisor, I remember thinking someone's going to say, why is Justin here? Like that was like a fear I had because I had not encountered those fluid situations. And that was the biggest struggle, is learning sort of to get my feet under how to navigate those situations. The thing I learned the most was you're not expected to have an answer. Everyone wants lawyers to have an answer. Trusted advisors don't give answers. They give a framework for how to proceed in a fluid situation. And that's it. I can give you an example if it's helpful, but because I'm talking in these fluffy words, but it's really, you're guiding them, and you're one of many constituents that they're drawing on in an intense situation.
Give me an example. I'll take an example.
Sure. So like this was a very recent example that a client came to me and said they got a term sheet from a VC that was an exploding offer, which means the VC is saying, if you don't sign this in 24 hours, I'm walking. And a lot of VC's term sheets have that line in them, but they don't mean anything. But this VC meant it. Now, if that client had caught me very early on in this learning phase of the trusted advisor, I probably would have come to the same answer, but I wouldn't have had the confidence and the sense of calm with which to approach it. I guess just to give you like the framework, like, my daughters play water polo, right? And so they played in countless games. They played in championship games, playoff games, overtime, where if they're shot, if they make, they win. And they're very intense. They are going to have more of those games in the future, so they'll be no less intense, but they're not going to lack the familiarity, right? And so there's a sense of like calm in the intensity, and that's what you get at this phase. And so when the client brought that to me, I had this sense of calm of, I don't know what the answer is at this moment, but I do know that we're going to analyze it in a way that both of us are going to agree that this is the right step forward. And I also am going to create sort of red line boundaries in this box of possibilities, we're going to agree, and then we're going to keep evaluating it. And so it's that sense of calm, and you're just pattern recognition and drawing on similar situations. And that's what you get. And what's so, the beginning part of this phase of my career was never so intense, but it's been the most rewarding. It's absolutely the most rewarding part of my career, because it is so powerful to have an impactful conversation with a CEO where they bring something up to them and you say, that's not a good idea, you should do this. And those words are 25 years of experience slammed into like a black hole weight of advice, right? It's informed by all that experience, and it carries that. And then the CEO or the CFO will say, thank you, right? Like that's why it's been the most rewarding part of my career, is I have more impactful conversations at that level.
Now, do you share that first part of your story with young lawyers who are just starting at the front end of building their career? I mean, it's a great story. Is that something you do a lot of?
It's a great question. And so mentoring and giving opportunities to associates, of course, table stakes. The reason I think the business development is easy to teach. Anytime I'm meeting a new client, I have an associate sit with me, see what it looks like, demystify it, and say, go out and do it yourself. There is no magic to this. Show them you're a person, show them you have passion, and let them know that you know everything from a legal standpoint, which is, of course, table stakes, and have them invest in the relationship. You go out and do it. So the business development aspect is something that is easy to show them. The reason the trusted advisor aspect of is hard to learn is because there aren't organic moments to bring someone in. I get a call on a Saturday from a client. You just don't go, oh, stop, please, I want to bring an associate, and it doesn't happen. And so that's the part that it just naturally, it's going to be hard to sort of mentor and show someone. And so what you're hoping that those can naturally occur at the end of a call, but it's something that you really have to learn a lot when you start getting into that phase of your career.
One of the things, Justin, I think is quite interesting about your story about the business development aspect of it is that, a lot of people are under the impression that, only extroverts are good at business development. I'm going to guess you're not an extrovert, just the way you talked about it. So what are your thoughts on that? Because, a lot of lawyers are not naturally extroverts.
Well, I repeat what I said. You got to get past this. You have to be authentic, right? And if you really are authentic, and so, I mean, these clients, I mostly, I don't go whale hunting for big M&A stuff. I mostly work at the sort of the bottom of the funnel, if you will, at startups, right? Because I don't need a big team to go with me on some response to an RFP. It's just me. I can have the relationship with them. So the first thing, what gets people nervous, especially the younger associates, is the table stakes knowledge you need from a lawyer standpoint. And it's just hard when you're going to get asked a question and you're like, I don't know how to say I don't know. Right? And I will tell you, it's funny, the longer you get in your career, the more often I'll say, actually, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Let me go talk to my colleagues and we'll get back to you. And the clients are like, yeah, we want you to tap into your resources. Associates, that's a hard muscle or a hard thing to learn, to just say, I don't know, let me follow up. Also, it's also important that you know, and it's sort of table stakes, industry market terms. And as a partner, you're going to have more line of sight into that. As associate, it takes a little more to get into that. That's why it's really important as an associate to just go along with partners and see that, and then learn how to do it yourself and demystify it. You don't have to be an outgoing personality. I also tell associates, I have my style. I have my style of negotiation. I have my style of talking to a client. Do not mimic or mirror my style. Who are you? And that is what you should be, your authentic self. Some people are very calm. They don't ever raise their voice. They have the gravitas. I'm a little more, loosey-goosey. Figure out what you are and then lean into that as part of your business development.
So you've been in private practice obviously for 2.5 decades. Have you ever thought about, going in-house and experiencing the business side? I'm sure you've had countless opportunities. Have you ever thought that seriously? And
Well, I did. Remember when I said I had the the 2x4 to the face of all clients firing me. I had no work, so I started there. I'm like, I got to try in-house. It didn't. At that time it didn't make sense. Like I really enjoy working in the law firm. I'm absolutely, like I said, this is a calling for me. I know it sounds cliche, but being a law firm partner, being a trusted advisor, it's like I feel like deep down it's what I was meant to be. And then I of course am fiercely loyal and to Pillsbury and all the opportunity it creates and all that it offers. And so it's just a perfect match. And so, you know, to jump and go in-house or something, it's not an itch I need scratched, if you will.
Yeah, interesting. Are there any other, I mean, can you see yourself doing anything else then in the future? Like, would you ever be an entrepreneur or do anything, like, have you ever thought about doing something even outside the law? Has that ever occurred to you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like what would be a drop the mic kind of a thing that I would do, it would be teaching. I've always loved teaching. I teach startup classes. Sometimes Hastings has an entrepreneurial program, and I go and teach startup classes to them. So if anything, if there would ever be something that is like completely in line with my personality, it's imbuing knowledge in young students that have that, you know, wonderful amount of enthusiasm at that stage of their career. But that's not something in my near-term plans at all.
Yeah. Well, Justin, I really appreciate your taking time. I really enjoyed your sharing the story and your vulnerability. It was really interesting hearing about that. I'm sure this will be really of interest and of assistance to many people. And I appreciate your taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Richard Hsu and Justin Hovey. Thanks.
Thank you.